Namaste, everyone. I'm going to give you Kundalini Yoga for the awakening of you. Before we start, I would like to discuss about building the lineage. So, the success of generations is within the lineage. And the lineage is a very ancient future term, as well as a very ancient past term. Lineage has everything to do with the prosperity of a generation, the creativity of a generation, and the virtues of a generation. So these words seem quite expansive, right? When we think of prosperity, right? Or creativity or virtues, there's a sense of expansion, there's a sense of emotional advancement and emotional maturity, right? So it's all inside the lineage. The lineage is the container for these expansive words such as prosperity, creativity, and virtues. And within the sort of, I like to say, the sort of sack of virtues, there's the dignity, divinity that you pull out, right? Dignity, integrity, sovereignty, intelligence. And the lineage is the momentum, right? The positive momentum. So the lineage is comprised of the patriarchal movement as well as the matriarchal movement, and the kind of dance between the patriarchal and the matriarchal movement. And that's what creates the spine, right? So when you do yoga, or if you danced, let's say you were a dancer in your young years, that sort of movement, right, between both sides of the body, both hemispheres of the brain, that creates a strong spine. And those people who have experience of like yoga or dance class, they have a very strong spine, right? Because it's this sort of crossing and recrossing of energy that creates the spine. So when we say have spine, we're saying to, have courage to let it flow in, to let it go, right? So the lineage represents the spine, right? The matriarchal and the patriarchal sort of crossing and recrossing, that sort of dance with each other, right? And within the lineage, there's generations of that, right? There's generations, and that's what kind of creates that bridge to these higher vibrations, right? It's that vertical line. We talk about the lineage and the many generations, right? The ancestors. It creates this sort of bridge, right? This sort of, we can call it the golden chain, right? That connects you to the ancient past or even the ancient future, where we have these teachers, right? And the elders represent the teachers. They hold the container, right, for the generations, the future generations, to have a sort of a platform for them to express themselves, to build themselves up for character development, right? For virtues, to establish these virtues in their life, right? To learn and educate themselves on these virtues through intermingling with the elders, right? That's the lineage. And the success of this planet throughout many thousands of years has been on the lineage, and the sort of character development that comes about through having these generations of perspective and experience, as well as contact with the earth through the many phases. Because it's like the longer you're on planet earth, because you may be 25 or 85, but when you look at your ancestors, that kind of doubles your lifespan, right? When you think about it. So the deeper that contact is, and you can even that the embodiment of you is the embodiment, that sort of bridge that connects you to your lineage, right? So when we talk about connecting to a higher vibration, we can say our lineage has, these ancestral traumas and these generational curses, right? Right? That can seem like a damper or seem like a very much of a challenge or struggle, because a lot of us, we've been in the dark age. So with the dark age, we have gone through this sort of numbness and this sort of suffering and this grief, right, that seems to never be ending, and the fatherless, the motherless, the poverty, the poor attitude, the subconscious weight that makes it difficult for us to create that bridge, that sort of vertical energy towards our spiritual self, our spiritual well-being, and begin to integrate and channel down that pipeline talents, gifts, techniques, tools into the body, so that we can function more from our liberated state, which is craftsmanship, rather than from our state walking around like horses with no alpha, right? Walking around like, where am I supposed to go, right? With no alpha, right? And the alpha in many ways represents, again, the container that holds the lineage, the knowledge of, in this example, many generations of horses, right? And what has worked and what doesn't work. And the same thing goes with like an elephant, a matriarch, in this sort of different scenario, right? The matriarch is usually selected because they have the container for knowledge in many generations, and they know how to download it, they know how to access it, and they are deeply connected to it, right? They've had interaction with previous matriarchs and that kind of thing, right? So when we think knowledge is power, right? Lineage is power. And in many ways, we deconstruct the lineage as a way to control, right? Or we try to build up our lineage as a way to, in this sort of, patriarchal white man type of experiment that we've been in for thousands of years, as a way to try to compete, right? Compete and to dominate and to be the superior race or the superior family or bloodline or lineage, right? Because as long as children are fatherless, motherless, you're not going to have the spine of the person, right, or of the persons, right? And the spine has everything to do with what we're doing Kundalini Yoga, which is exactly you building up the father archetype in you and you building up the mother archetype in you, right? And then having the dance, because Kundalini Yoga, it is about character development in many ways, right? The father has to, your inner patriarch, right, has to do with your authority, right? The authoritative aspect of you, the leader aspect, the sort of alpha, the person who takes responsibility, who takes accountability, who has a sort of duty or participation with life, right? Getting things done, directing the energy towards the great, the prioritizing or delegating. The great matriarch has to do with our emotional maturity, our emotional well-being, or emotional advancement. Because us as human beings, we cannot reach these sort of higher initiations of creativity or prosperity or knowledge within the lineage, right? Strength, nervous system strength, without the emotional maturity, right? And that has to do with being tested, right? And the people don't like to be emotionally tested, right? But through the emotional testing, we'll say, it builds up virtues, right, of like discernment, paying attention, what is intimacy, these kinds of philosophical concepts, like what is intimacy, you could say speaking your truth. So it's kind of like a self-psychology, right? And that mother frequency very much puts you in this kind of trance-like state where you can really sort of connect with what it means to be soulful and what it means to be alive and what it means to be spiritually dignified and spiritually whole, right? And that kind of creates the dignity of a person, right? The matriarch is the dignity of you, and the sort of soulful philosophy of that creates this whole realm of virtue that is character development, craftsmanship. So when a child goes to their mother, they're asking basically, like they say, hey mom. Right now kids say like, hey mom, like I have this sort of skill or have this talent, right? Like, and the mother is that sort of encouragement for craftsmanship, right? The craftsmanship, right? The sort of, building it, the self-worth around your craftsmanship by believing in it and sort of imagining it and kind of, playing with it. And then the father has to do with the projection of the craftsmanship, right? You could say of the selling of it, or the sort of the reciprocity of it, the sort of exchange of that, the sort of further education of that, the kind of progress of that, right? The kind of it being presented to the world and it being safe and the creativity being served, right? Right? So this is the kind of intertwining, when you think of the Kundalini, you're basically thinking of this. And this energy right here, it gives you a force, a vertical force, this force moving up the chakra system, right? Which we're going to do a meditation about the sort of patriarch and the matriarch, right? And in our sort of outer world, right, that shows up as the father and the mother, right? And, when we have one absent, right, there becomes an imbalance, right, which a lot of us have to face and repair, right? And even myself, having the decease of my father at a very young age, I had to repair that within myself, right? And how I did that was I connected with an elder. I connected with a man, like a father image or grandfather image, and I connected to that channel to kind of sort of install the patriarch father within me, right? And I used Yogi Bhajan, right, as that sort of link channel through a patriarchal intelligence, right? Which we need both, right? So if you don't have the mother, right, or you're motherless or something like that, or if you don't have the type of mother that is actually holding the matriarchal frequency, because you can be a woman and you can hold the matriarchal frequency, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're really amplifying it, you're using it, or that you're really trying to connect with it or participate with it. Every woman has a very strong matriarchal frequency. It's just the fact that you're participating with it, you're using it, you're going deep with it, you're accessing it, right? So if you're motherless in many ways, or don't have that type of mother that you desire, right? You can again link up to an elder woman that doesn't necessarily have to be somebody physical in your life, right? Like Yogi Bhajan is dead, and he was, he died before I was even born. He died before I was even born. So again, you can link up. It's the flow that they create. It's the momentum that you're linking up to. It's sort of chi and the usage of that, and the sort of knowledge of the chi that and how they moved it, and how they unlocked and opened up and sort of unblocked themselves to create that sort of electrified energy within themselves is really what you want to link up to, right? And there's always a teaching to that, right? There's always a patriarchal teacher, a matriarchal teacher. And in the sort of lineage, we talk about like the 7 lineage, right? The 7 lineage. And or the 14, right? The 14 generations. It's a common, the seven generations, the 14 generations, right? Of creating the momentum through the patriarchal and the matriarchal channel, and that has everything to do with perfecting the knowledge of that you're holding and you're containing within your particular time space organization that you created with the many generations of you, right? Your grandma, your grandpa, so on and so forth, right? And all the sort of cousins and aunts that all sort of inputted their sort of transmission, right? So we're, you represent the kind of transmission of 7 generations, 14 generations, right? And you also represent the responsibility of that, right? And you're sort of, you get to, the organization of it, you get to kind of pick and choose how you're going to reorganize it, right? So you may be given a sort of organized sort of space, and let's say for you it feels totally disorganized, right? This sort of contained space in which 7 generations, and you have parents, grandparents that have created this sort of momentum through patriarchal and matriarchal that has kind of carried this sort of this horizontal sort of movement with life without this vertical type of channel of profound energy like poetry or creativity or music or virtues like self-esteem, self-worth, that kind of soulful philosophy. So they've just kind of been moving along, right, the earth without creating that sort of power surge. You can install it, right? You can install it as you in your own generation that you hold, right? You hold your own generation, right? Like I hold the generation of the Gen Z, right? That's the space, time space I hold, for my life, right? The Gen Z time space. So the Gen Z time space has its own planetary progression, its own sort of portal. Within it has its own kind of human code or human sort of initiation. Like, for example, MTV generation, that generation has its own coding, its own sort of planetary or planetary as well as human sort of initiation or age, I like to say, right? An age of intelligence for that particular group, a particular micro group, right? So you can use the planetary progression or the sort of human kind of initiation to help you to install that kind of vertical buildup, right? To a surge of energy through yourself. And how we really create that sort of channel is through the dancing of the patriarchal and the matriarchal energies. The sort of, we call it, that's what the Shakti is. Because when you think of the Shakti, your Shakti represents sort of being in your whole. It's a woman energy, right? Femme consciousness, but it also has masculine principles to it too. It's whole, right? It's kind of seen as this like very feminine sort of power surge, but it also has this masculine, which is about being grounded, about being of the world and sharing your dance with the world, right? And you sharing your dance with the world to exchange energy, to create reciprocity, right? To even create equality or support equality or justice or fairness, right? To really create a abundant life for yourself, right? The Shakti energy. So that has everything to do with the Kundalini energy, the crossing and the recrossing, right, of the spine. Like you have a spine, and without a spine, it's like we are, there's a sense of just being bound to the earth, like just kind of, but not having that surge of energy to actually create this sort of, because earth is not this just horizontal, it's this vertical, like mountains, the rolling hills, the land ascends, it descends, and the sort of different altitudes, right? And for us to be able to handle the different altitudes, right, of life, we do have to have access to like a vertical energy, which has to do with our sort of spiritual lifeline, our spiritual life force. And and the kind of lineage of that When you think of, like, for example, chiefs, like, we can look at like Native American chiefs. We can also look at elephants. I love looking at elephants, and you can see the matriarch elephants. There's a sense of, like, you can see within the current matriarch that there's been like this whole momentum of knowledge of the land and how to use the body to create this experience for your whole tribe that is successful, right? And you can see that there's just like almost like it just goes on and on, like way far back and goes way far in the future. And even when you look at like Native American chiefs, you can see before the colonization, you can see the kind of the sort of lineage, the arc, I like to say, of men, right? Or the arc of women, right? Now, with the colonization of really everywhere, this on this planet, with this sort of patriarchal white man kind of experiment, I like to say, right? And that the sort of many ways the collapse of the sort of tribal ways, as we are sort of programmed to think the tribal ways it isn't efficient, it isn't sustainable, it isn't practical or productive. The gods, the whole religious aspect, the spiritual aspect is just, has nothing to do with current times. It's out of date. It really serves no purpose. It's kind of like hogwash. It's just like law of fantasy land, right? So, but that tribal energy is the original buildup of the lineage, right? When we talk about the tribe represents the ground, it represents the soil, right? You can't just pull a lineage out of your ass. That either comes from the soil, right? The tribe represents the soil, right? You without the nutrients of the soil, you can't grow anything, right? So it represents the nutrients. So the tribe is associated with how to cultivate the land, right? How to understand the seasons, how to understand these type of your how to take care of your children, or how to have, to give birth, right? Conception, a man, right? The rite of passage of manhood into wisdom, rite of passage, womanhood into wisdom, right? That has everything to do, the rite of passage has everything to do with the soil, with the tribe. And then you start to kind of come out of the soil, right? You sort of, sprout, or, levitate. That's the vertical line. You start to build up the lineage. And each season, you can see it as a generation. You build it up, right? And then when you look at many years of like a rose, you see many, many generations, the death, the birth, the death, the birth, the death, the birth, right? And each sort of death and birth, there's a sense of experience with the earth, understanding, and that also creates a sort of intuitive ability, right? And that's what makes the alpha. When you think of like a pack of llamas or alpacas or horses, you always see there's this alpha, and usually that is the person who has the spine. And usually, the alpha is the one that, the other llamas try to, like, do these little things to try to test. Usually the alpha is tested, right, by the the emotionally immature sort of llamas that are just doing whatever, right? Kind of like, having no clue, right? They're seeing like adolescent type of llamas, right? And they always be testing the alpha. And the alpha has the spine to be able to pass these tests. So usually the alpha, the matriarch, patriarch, is the one that's tested, right? And this goes all the way back to the ancient Egyptian times, where you are tested. And the testing for the alpha is not just within you, it's within many generations of you. And you get to see, when you really connect or meditate upon your sort of lineage, or your sort of arc of women or arc of men, you can kind of see the different scenarios, the different challenges, the different time space timeline, and you get to see how things played out. You get to see what choices were made. You get to see what choices you can make now, right? So all of that is just what makes you quite an old soul. And you don't necessarily have to be somebody who has, been around the block 20 million times, incarnating, reincarnating, reincarnating. You just have to know how to connect with what you have, right? You need to know how to connect with what you have, and take responsibility for your opportunity to reorganize it if that is what you choose. But the reorganization of, like, say, poverty into abundance, mindset, or whatever subconscious sort of weight you have that has a particular frequency of, like, self-concept or self-esteem, it's going to require you to input higher energy that comes from a vertical sort of whoo, right? And many people have done that. They have linked up to this vertical energy. We call this like golden link, where they were able to create this sort of velocity of the matriarchal and the patriarchal intelligence, creating this dance. And that's the sort of highest energy we can create in the physical body, is the patriarchal, the father and the mother sort of dance, right? With the sort of wind with the wind of the tribal drum, you can say, that has been drumming for thousands of years, right? With the lineage sort of recitation, right? Which is about surviving, and then about healing, and then about emotional maturity, right? So with our lineage, the momentum is through the three lineages, the three, right? When we talk about building up the lineage, it's in the three generations. It's in the child, it's in the mother, it's in the grandmother, or, the son, the father, the grandfather, right? And these three generations can represent like a time, 300 years. Let's say each generation is like 100-year span time, right? You may not be born for 100 years, but you basically have this wind of chi that moves for the 100 years, right? So I was born 1995. 100 years from now, the wind of my chi, of my life force, my energy, my sort of practice of life, my creativity will still be it will still be moving, right? So it's like 300 years. And the real 500 years is when you start to really experience, again, 5 generations, 500 years. That's when you really get to experience what we call the power, the power movement that cannot be challenged, right? And in many ways, when the colonization of North America, there was these type of things, these type of 500 years type of generations, right? And the sort of the taking these chiefs out, or these chiefess, taking them out, right, was was an attempt to sort of eliminate that momentum. But that momentum cannot be eliminated. With the 500 years, that wind, it will go for 1,000 years. The spiritual wind will go for 5,000 years. So you can have, in the collapse of your lineage, or, due to colonization and these sort of inputs of these lower vibrations that are, you intermingle with, that, in discrimination, segregation from your own people, and from your own right to be happy, and right of, just natural things of survival. The wind of that spiritual wind will be there. And that's the thing of why this yogic science has still gone on. Even now, it's like 40,000, 80,000, even before that, years old. The reason it's still, the wind of it is still going, is because not only was there 500 years, there was a lot more of like 5, 7, 20 generations practicing and perfecting the teachings, right? So it can go dormant, right? It can be obliterated, it can be removed, and it can be exiled, banned, whatever it is, right? But that doesn't mean the spiritual wind will not be there. And that's the thing about the sort of Native American, you can say the spirit, right? And the sort of teachings of the land, and the sort of the we can call the sort of container in the space, right? It can be dormant, right? But it doesn't mean that it's gone. It doesn't mean like it's there. It's just a matter of fact of unlocking it. When you unlock it, it's like all this pranic wind, just whoa, you just get electrified with it, right? And then all of a sudden your memory body, regardless of if you have no sort of connection to your Native American ancestors, or you're like 3% or something, 16% of that, you can still tap into pranic wind, and you can use that, and that can come through your creativity, that can come through your sort of, it can give you a boost, really. That's what why we 3 generations is to give you a boost in the right direction. That's what elders are for. Your mother, father, grandmother, it's to give you a boost in the right direction, right? So that you have such a velocity to your energy chi and your sort of creativity, where you it's almost like you erase the bad karma, you absolutely erase the negative karma, you erase the misfortune, you just erase it all for the generation to have an experience of yes, challenge and initiation that will test and break you down and all that kind of stuff, but will also be one of a more ecstatic, exalted state. Right, and I think that's what a lot of us are trying to sort of recreate and sort of repair, right? But the fatherless, the motherless, that is what creates this sort of imbalance within a child, right? Or the father and the mother being against each other, that's even more of a sort of imbalanced, right? Which is Adam and Eve. It presents this program of like man and woman are like battling each other, right? So woman is like never enough. I want more love. I need more energy, more time, more self-care. I need more from my husband. But really that more that she wants is the more sort of practice of her soulful philosophy. And that can show up in many ways. That's really what she wants, is more practice of her soulful philosophy. When we talk about like Native American women, like this more, that really was not a thing. Like that was not like, I need more from my husband or more from life, I'm feeling bored or dissatisfied, right? And then that kind of thing. There was none of that, right? Because the women were so well fed spiritually, right? Through the drum of the tribe, through the recitation of the lineage. That was really all they needed. And it was very simple. It wasn't like some extravagant sort of theatrical show. It was very, very simple. But yet that is what fed the more, right? Which the more is to be expanded, exalted, right? With your own life, with your own ability, your force, your own life force. And in that interaction with the father, right? The father very much is wanting to create this sort of courage to make a choice of peace, right? And that can be have the courage to make a choice of peace within whatever that is. And sometimes the courage of peace is not always, something that does not imply challenge. Sometimes the courage of peace can mean that you have to be prepared, you have to be a warrior, right? Because the warrior side is the two sides of one coin. The peace and the warrior is the same, basically the same. The warrior is being able to liberate yourself, and the peace is kind of the recognition, I am God, me and God are one, right? That's the kind of peace, and to provide that warriorship, that charactership to the people so that they can liberate themselves through whatever discipline they need to be able to have that experience of their liberation, to have the peace, which is the recognition, I am God, I am I am an incredible force. I'm confident, I am bold, I am ambitious, I am brave, these type of things, right? That's what men learn, right? And the women, they very much represent the celebration, right? When you liberate yourself, right, and you overcome war, you get out of a period of war, there's a sense of celebration, right? As a way to appreciate humanity and to relate to the opportunity to continue to believe in humanity. That's what celebration is. I believe in humanity. That's what it is. I believe in humanity. So, in celebration, like, we were, the Second World War, right? You come out of that as my great-grandfather, and there's just, right, the baby boomers, right? The celebration of all celebrations, right? And the end of this great suffering and this great turmoil and this great sort of deep sadness. And that celebration has to do with, I still believe in humanity, right? So when you're doing your dance and out of I still believe in humanity comes all these dances. So like in a great period where like you're in a native tribe and everybody's sick and everyone's dying and there's, you don't know what it is, right? And you're trying everything you can do to heal the people who everyone's dying, and it's just, it's like in the next 6 months everybody might be dead, we don't know. The celebration is the kind of I believe in humanity, and that's what the woman represents. I believe in humanity, and that's the kind of peace to a man, right? The kind of inspiration, right? Because she represents that sort of renaissance that usually comes out of a period where there could be a question in humanity, right? A sort of downfall of humanity, or sort of distrust of humanity, or a disgrace of humanity. And that's the kind of way to I believe in humanity, right? And that's the kind of challenge, right? Women we face, we have either to emotionally mature or mostly emotionally be immature and be like, fuck humanity, and that kind of negative mind, right? But men, they feed off of that energy. So the Native American men, they were so like, exalted because, the women would have this great ceremony with celebration with what they were doing, with the women, with the kids, with the earth, the medicine, all of that kind of stuff, the spirit guides, the sort of their spiritualism, and men would be exalted by that, right? Because and that creates a warrior. Seeing people believe in humanity is what creates a warrior, right? A protector, right? Somebody who creates a sort of discipline within himself to look at humanity through the eyes of God, as me and God are one, right? And to actually to project that out, right, into the young men and into why they go to wars, because believe in humanity, or they're at odds with themselves. They're sort of battling themselves, trying to work something out, some karma with themselves, or collective karma. But that kind of this sort of mending, or this sort of force of knowledge comes through the liberation. That's where we have knowledge, right? And until we have that knowledge, many times we can keep doing this battling with ourselves and battling, right? Because we're trying to get out of ourselves the knowledge of something that we just can't figure it out, and we're getting agitated by it, right? Aggressive and frustrated by this sort of karma that we are not taking responsible for, and we're not strong enough to connect with the knowledge of what we're experiencing, this sort of challenge. We don't know how to initiate ourselves through it. We get kind of like just agitated by it, right? And then we battle ourselves and battle other people. We're agitated by diversity. We're agitated by all these religions. I'm agitated by Muslims. I'm agitated by, the Jews, right? And not understanding the type, not knowing how to initiate oneself. It's just like in the challenge and just kind of doing this and then feeling really tense and not knowing how to flow with it, how to creatively move it in a way that creates a sort of experience of knowledge. So that's what we're working with this particular practice, this particular Kriya that I'm giving you all for sort of how we can build up the lineage so that we can start to, we want to sort of resurrect, is what I want to say. Resurrect the patriarch and the matriarch within ourselves, right? The sort of father, the sort of mother. That's the elder. When the father and the mother are kind of in this sort of dance with each other, that's the sort of elder knowledge, right? In our sort of, dominating patriarchal force, the sort of downfall of that is not including the woman, right? Not including emotional maturity, right? Women represent emotional maturity, right? And men, they need that, right? They need that, right? But in many ways, women can be excluded or hidden or that type of thing. But it's really the woman represents the emotional maturity, the soulful philosophy, the container for the sort of channel of talents and gifts and sort of feeling complete and sort of spiritually refined, right, by these sort of virtues, by this sort of groundedness with the tribe and the soil, right, as sort of believing in humanity. So in many times, this patriarchal matrix system, this sort of white man dream, right, it didn't really include the believing in humanity, right? The woman, regardless of ethnicity, the woman represents the belief, I believe in humanity, right? And that I believe in humanity at the end of the day is how we're able to, how we are inspired enough to liberate ourselves, right? And a man represents the hud, the liberation, right? The push, the force to be reckoned with that crack open somebody, that leads to the sort of character, right? Men represent character, women represent craftsmanship, right? I don't think I can say craftswomanship, right? So character and craftsmanship are kind of like hand in hand, right? Like two sides to one coin, right? And the craftsmanship of a woman really holds the sort of I believe in humanity, and with that kind of I believe in humanity, it kind of echo throughout thousands of years. In it has these sort of tools, techniques, and talents, this soulful philosophy that has a sort of transformative ability to heal, resolve, complete whatever it needs to be, to sort of create a continuous sort of joy, self-esteem, or self-worth that is able to cycle through patterns that have energy rather than cycling through patterns that, constantly battling yourself, right? So in this patriarchal age, our whole character was battled, right? We're battling our self-worth, we're battling our self-esteem, and Kundalini yoga is, in many times, people feel like they're battling themselves, right? Like, right? It's just like, whoa, like it seems so intense because you need that intensity. The patriarchal age, the dark age, it brought about this intensity, right? And that is how that's character development. Intensity creates a sort of electrical, sort of electricity, right, to turn the light on, which represents the sort of the woman, the light, right, the lighthouse, the knowledge on what is light and the usage and the purpose of it, and the continuity of that light, right, the usage of your chi, and how to use it to help you get where you're going in life, wherever that may be for you and what you want to do. So light bulb, the sort of electricity, is that sort of intensity, your character, right? The stronger the character, the more intense you are, passionate, ambitious, what, aspirations. But the light bulb, the actual sort of, light reveal, that represents the sort of the craftsmanship. It represents you showing up to the world and expressing yourself, articulating yourself, and it represents the sophistication of you. When you see a light bulb, I'm sure back in the old times, right, when you see that, you're like, oh my God, that's so sophisticated, right? It represents the innovation, the inventiveness of human capability. And that's the craftsmanship, the inventiveness, the innovation. And when, light bulbs came out, I'm sure everyone was like, oh my God. They were just exalted. They were they're like in this great celebration, probably singing and dancing about light bulbs, right? Because that innovation, that inventiveness, it is a sort of renaissance in a way that makes people want to be alive instead of just numb out and just kind of like just sort of trolley on through life. It creates this type of this type of expandedness in a human being where they're like, light bulb, inventiveness, innovation. Okay, right? I have the character, the intensity, to light it up, or to turn on my own light bulb of my brain and my mind and my body movement, right? And I use the inventiveness, the innovation, the creative energy, the ingenuity to repattern. So if I'm dealing with a lot of jealousy, or you have parents that you jealousy, or parents that don't want you to do well because they feel low about themselves, and they choices that have created to sort of lock them in to something that they really don't want, lying to themselves, whatever that is. Right, you can see it for what it is, right? You have it in you, the sort of intensity of the patriarch and the sort of light bulb of the matriarch, to be able to redefine that, to reorganize that, right, to renew, right, to renewal your choice, your ability to move energy. And that's what Kundalini Yoga is. We're trying to create this renewal that helps us to move energies in ways that will redefine, reinvent our experience on earth. And I'm telling you, the more you're redefining, reinventing, resurrecting, refashioning, all of that, the more the more you fill up and you satisfy the more, right? Because that implies that you are sort of working with what you got and all the ancestors and whatever family, that family issue, and fatherless, motherless, whatever that is. And you're using your energy to sort of gain, to create this sort of mending of the battle, the sort of knowledge to the battle, the sort of new cycle that you're trying to install, right? We're all trying to install a new cycle, right? And we all come from these cycles that a lot of us, were created before we were even born by a father or grandfather, all this stuff. And that's about you. When you create a new cycle, what is a cycle? It's you're basically, it's like a circle. You're revolving, basically, right? The revolving is the sort of the circulation of energy, the sort of phases, the patterns, the sort of chronology, and the sort of movement, time, space type of thing. And when you get more in sort of connected to that within your own aura, you can start to connect with your own sort of revolving motion, your own time space phases, initiations, and type of cycles within you, and patterns, and you can begin to have a sort of command over how you can, sort of recircuit it, so that the sort of circuit of energy, like qi, right, or feng shui, feng shuiing a house, can have the sort of circuit of energy that gives the most sort of the most sort of balance, right?